Good morning, everybody. My name is Amanda Crowfoot. I'm Secretary General of the European University Association, and I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome to you all this morning for this official launch of the MSCA4Ukraine scheme and the information session about the scheme. Just before we start, I'd like to just make a couple of practical points. To let you know first that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available and published on the EUA YouTube channel after the event, including with English and Ukrainian subtitles. We really want this session to be an active session with your participation. So please do ask your questions throughout the event and we will answer as many of them as we can later on. To ask your questions, please can we ask you to use the Q&A button, the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen, not the chat. You can obviously use the chat for other communication, but if you have a specific question, please put it into the Q&A so we can see it easily. And you'll also be able there to vote for which questions you actually think are the most important, so we can make sure that we deal with those that have the most interest. So to give you just a quick overview of our programme for today, essentially our programme splits into two parts. First, we will have the kind of official welcome and launch of the programme. And then after that, the second half of the day will very importantly be the practical sessions that will actually let you know how you can apply for the scheme, how it works, what it does, and all the details that you need. Before I welcome our first speakers, I just would really like to say on behalf of EUA how pleased and proud we are to be part of the consortium that's delivering this MSCA4Ukraine scheme. So as you know, this is the first dedicated fellowship scheme to support Ukrainian researchers, which I think is absolutely essential at this point in time. EUA stands firmly in solidarity with Ukraine and is completely committed to supporting the higher education sector of Ukraine in any way that we can. I think this probably goes for the whole of the university sector. We've seen a huge mobilization of support and solidarity by the university sector since February 2022. And so we know that universities are really keen to contribute and to collaborate with their Ukrainian counterparts. We're also at EUA really proud to work closely with our colleagues in the Union of Rectors of Ukraine and also all of the Ukrainian members of EUA. And we really want to strengthen these links and these relationships going forward. So in terms of this scheme specifically, we really hope that this scheme will have impact in terms of supporting Ukrainian researchers and also forging long-term partnerships across Europe, which I think is really important. We also hope that it can act in the future as a model of support for the kind of programme we can have to support researchers at risk beyond Ukraine, across the world effectively, looking forward. I'd also like to say that we are delighted in the huge interest that there has been in this webinar, in this session today. At the last count, there was well over 1,300 registrations, and I'm told it's going up by the minute. And so I think that really shows how needed this is and how interested people are. And I really hope that we can all come together to deliver this scheme and make it a real success for the future and something that has, as I say, tangible impact. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to our partners in this scheme to also give their welcome remarks. The two people you're now going to hear from are firstly, Thomas Hesse, who is Deputy Secretary General of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. And Dr. Hesse has been in this position since February 2011. Before that, he's worked at the association in the selection department and in terms of in the Department of Sponsorship Abroad. And he's a biologist by background with long experience in research and in this area. Then you will hear from Gemma Irvin, who is Vice President for Equality and Diversity at Maynooth University in Ireland. And Gemma's responsible at the university for leading strategic change in the areas of equality, diversity, inclusion, and interculturalism. She's previously also been Head of Policy and Strategic Planning in the Irish Higher Education Authority. So with that, I will stop and I will hand over first to Thomas for your welcome remarks, please. The floor is yours.
I'm glad to have that, and thanks for your kind invitation. Dear Deputy Director General Hoffmann, dear Director General Taranov, dear Amanda, dear Gemma, esteemed scholars and representatives of the Ukrainian European research communities. It's an honor to welcome you to this launch of the MSCA4Ukraine program on behalf of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. The mandate of the Humboldt Foundation is to support the international cooperation of excellent researchers independent of their fields of research or nationality. Over the past 70 years of its existence, the Humboldt Foundation has supported about 200 top-level scholars from the Ukraine through its research fellowships and awards. And we continue to maintain a particularly active network of Ukrainian alumni to this day. And of course, we support many of them by inviting them for additional research stays in Germany in these difficult times. As early as 2017, we also started supporting the first Ukrainian scholars under severe threat through our scholar protection program, the Philipp Schwarz Initiative. Following the Russian invasion in February 2022, the number of exiled Ukrainian scholars that we are supporting through the Philipp Schwarz Initiative surged to almost 100. All of those have found safe havens at universities and higher education institutions throughout all of Germany. However, this is only a very first step, and sadly many more threatened researchers from the Ukraine need this kind of support as well. Despite the horror and deep sadness that we all are feeling, there are two things that are heartening me. First, I'm really deeply impressed by the resilience of the Ukrainian people and of Ukrainian scholars, the indefatigable determination to fulfill their duties as researchers and as teachers in the face of immeasurable threats to maintain Ukrainian academia in whatever way possible and to return and to rebuild as soon as possible. It's just incomparable. Second, I'm comforted by the great solidarity of academic communities all over Europe with the Ukrainian scholars and students. The European Commission's MSCA4Ukraine program is one particularly important manifestation of this solidarity. The Humboldt Foundation is proud to be part of this unified European response effort together with scholars at West Europe, at Maynooth University and the European University Association. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the European Parliament and the Commission for creating this program, and to the Research Executive Agency and the Commission's MSCA unit for their immense support and advice. Let me also thank Jeanette O'Gorman of SARU, Henriette Stöber and Michael Gäbel of the EUA, our associate partners, PAUSE and SAR Global, and the many others who have made this ambitious and important project possible. Most of all, however, let me thank you, the Ukrainian researchers, who will use this support to ensure the continued strength of Ukrainian academia. And thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you so much for your words. And now we hand over to Gemma. Gemma, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Amanda. To you and to your colleagues at the European University Association for hosting today's important event. Our president, Professor Eva Leinonen, wanted to be here with us also, but had to send her apologies due to a pre-existing commitment. On behalf of Maynooth University, which is home to the Scholars at Risk Europe, let me say that we are privileged to partner with the European University Association and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation to build and implement this ambitious EU-funded scheme to support displaced researchers from Ukraine. Together with your organizations, Maynooth University is proud to be part of this large global movement in support of researchers at risk. We are very grateful to the European Commission for their key support for the MSCA4Ukraine under the skłodowska-curie actions. This much needed support will enable displaced researchers from Ukraine to continue their important work in safety and facilitate their continued connections to colleagues and institutions in Ukraine, and strengthen their collaboration and exchange with the international research community. As an active member of the Scholars at Risk network, Maynooth University has been supporting researchers at risk for many years. We've been hosting visiting researchers from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and elsewhere. Maynooth is also active in national and European level efforts to support researchers at risk. Earlier this year, as part of Ireland's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Maynooth University hosted 1,200 displaced Ukrainians on campus in our student accommodation when they had first arrived into Ireland. We also established the National Student and Researcher Help Desk to welcome and provide a central point of support for students and researchers displaced who would like to continue their studies and work in Ireland. And of course, we're delighted to host the Scholars at Risk Europe and to lead the EU-funded Inspire Europe project to strengthen support in Europe for researchers at risk. And in all of this work, Maynooth University shares with Scholars at Risk and our partner organisations here today a commitment to the principle of academic freedom as an essential precondition for excellence in research. This principle is central to Maynooth University's mission and our strategic plan. And we're equally committed to the principles of equality, diversity, inclusion, and interculturalism, principles that underpin academic excellence and enhance research and learning. But unfortunately, in these present times, and in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it has never been more urgent to publicly reassert these values and to support those who face risks when these values are ignored. And the MSCA4Ukraine does exactly that. It puts into practice the EU's core principles of academic freedom and the freedom of scientific research. So it is an absolute honour to be part of this work and to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much, Gemma. So now, after those opening remarks, I'd now like to move to the official launch of the scheme, and then I'd like to introduce our next two speakers. So we're absolutely delighted to have with us this morning Viviane Hoffmann, who will do the official launch of the scheme. Viviane is Deputy Director General in DG Education, in the Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. She's been there since May 2018. She's been at the European Commission, however, since 1988 in various positions, including as Director of Communication and with Citizens. We're absolutely thrilled to have her here today with us to launch the scheme. After that, I'd be really pleased to welcome Igor Taranov, who is Director General of the Directorate of Science and Innovation of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine. And he will give a very important message on behalf of the research sector in Ukraine. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Ms. Hoffmann. Viviane, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Director General, I would like to warmly welcome all of you. It is a great honor to have everybody around this screen for this opening ceremony this morning. Since the beginning of Russia's illegal war of aggression, the European Commission has demonstrated its unwavering solidarity with Ukraine. And we also fully stand with Ukraine's research and innovation community. As we all know, the Ukrainian research and innovation system and infrastructure have suffered significant damage. And the war has also severely impeded the ability of Ukrainian scientists to perform their research activities. The European Union has taken actions to support the Ukrainian research and innovation community, and MSCA4Ukraine is one of the key actions set up by the European Commission by Commissioner Maria Gabriel in this context, and it demonstrates the European Union's strong commitment to support the Ukrainian researchers community. The MSCA4Ukraine call was launched on 28th of September. It will enable displaced researchers from Ukraine to continue their work in other European host institutions. The 25 million euro scheme will be coordinated by 3 experienced European organizations: Scholars at Risk Europe, hosted at Maynooth University, the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, and the European University Association, gathering collectively a unique experience in assisting researchers at risk. I would like to thank them for this. As with the other Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, MSCA4Ukraine will provide optimal working conditions to talented scientists from Ukraine and support their research and their scientific development. We will also build in mechanism to support the return of the funded researchers back to Ukraine, to facilitate cooperation with Ukrainian institutions, and to help reintegrate the researchers when the circumstances will allow. We believe that this initiative will allow researchers to contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine's research and innovation capacity. And it is also worth noting that secondments of researchers funded under MSCA4Ukraine to Ukrainian institutions will be strongly encouraged once it is safe to do that. This will not only benefit researchers, but it will also strengthen solidarity and scientific cooperation between institutions in the European Union and in Ukraine. As Commissioner Maria Gabriel stressed last week during the Research and Innovation Days, our objective is to preserve and to nurture Ukraine's vast research community for the benefit of Ukraine today and in the future. I would like to encourage organizations interested in hosting fellows from Ukraine and researchers who had to flee their country to take full advantage of the opportunities offered by MSCA4Ukraine. We are here to support you. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for your words. Really great to have you here to launch the event. So now I pass over to Igor Taranov for his remarks. Please, Igor, go ahead.
Thank you very much. The Deputy Director General for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture from the European Commission, dear Madam Secretary General of European University Association, as well as Deputy Secretary General of European University Association, and dear Vice President for Equality and Diversity from Maynooth University, dear colleagues, friends, especially dear participants from Ukraine and foreign countries who join us at this very important event. I'd like to express my gratitude to our international partners for organizing such a very important event for Ukrainian researchers and scientists. And I'm very happy to participate in it today. The next one, I'd like to express my gratitude to Ukrainian Army, the numerous of foreign partners who help in Ukraine to liberate its territory from the Russian aggression. As you know, during the war, research sector of Ukraine suffered substantial losses, which significantly affected its staff, infrastructure, and functioning scheme. It is currently extremely difficult to estimate the damages. Therefore, the situation is unpredictable. There are problems with collecting information on staff potential, the damages of research and innovation infrastructure, and the ability to carry out scientific and research activities. For 225 days, the full-scale war launched by Russia against Ukraine has been taking lives, forcing Ukrainians to leave their homes, scientists and innovators to look for opportunities abroad, and destroying our infrastructure. Because of this brutal war, about 15% of research infrastructure of higher education and scientific institutions had damaged. Now we concentrate our efforts on the creation of appropriate conditions for scientists and innovators, academic mobility program for the return of scientists and innovators who were forced to leave the country. And the next one, our direction to restore and modernize of research and innovation infrastructure. We also direct in the field of science and innovator to address the country's primary needs. And finally, the main direction is integration into the European and global research areas. Let me briefly to highlight what we have done in this regard. For now, ratification of the agreement on the participation of Ukraine in the program Horizon Europe. It's very important for Ukraine, as you know. The next one step is very important for Ukrainian researchers and innovators is acquiring full membership in the COST Association. It was in March 2022. Next one, very important for researchers and innovations. We regulate of academic mobility issues, and the main purpose of it is to guarantee the right to a safe education for students, a safe working condition for scientists who were displaced in more safe region of Ukraine or abroad, and facilitate their return to our country. For the successful participation in the Horizon Europe program, the Minister is working hard on the creation of the national portal of international cooperation. The next one, very important step, will be the preparation of the legal framework for the creation of the coordination center and the network of national contact points of the Horizon Europe program. And now, very good news for everyone. The draft of the National Plan on Open Science has been submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, and in the near future, I hope tomorrow or on Saturday, it will be adopted. Well, let me explain a very important issue in Ukraine. As you know, we have presented the project of the recovery plan. The plan includes a separate section of the development of science and innovation. In particular, within the framework of this part of this document, we are going to conduct an analysis of the status of tasks and indicators of the roadmap for the integration of scientific and innovative systems into the European research area. Based on the result of the analysis in 2023, we purpose to update the plan for its implementation, taking into account the updated visions and missions of the European Union and the field of science and innovation development, and to approve an updated roadmap by the government decision, which will require to provision and appropriate resources for the medium term. In the conditions of limited resources of the state budget in Ukraine, we have strong cooperation with international partners to attract international technical assistance, especially for the restoration and the development of research infrastructure. And the German-Ukrainian Excellence Centers may become the first such project in 2023. Well, we are very grateful to the European Commission and all other international partners for every initiative aimed at supporting the field of science and innovation for each our researchers who can continue their scientific activities, and for all kinds of support that you provide to preserve the scientific potential of Ukraine. We're incredibly grateful for the decision taken by the European Commission and the European Union to support displaced scientists from Ukraine who have left Ukraine due to the ongoing war, to continue their research activities in European countries. We are convinced the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Action for Ukraine scheme provides them with all possible assistance for successful integration into the European society. This is a very important support measure which will allow the researchers to continue their activities abroad. However, it is also important to help reduce the gap in the working conditions of other scientists who continue to work in their native countries. First, we expect that the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Actions for Ukraine will contribute to the development of communication mechanisms between the host European organization and the home organization of the scientists. It will provide the possibility for scientists working online while being in the unoccupied part of Ukraine. It is quite possible for some directions. Thank you once again for standing with Ukraine. Thank you once time more for supporting Ukraine. And I hope that the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Action for Ukraine will support Ukrainian researchers in this very strong way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your words. And I think, yes, I think we all share your hope that that's exactly what this scheme will do. I wonder if while we have you with us, I could maybe ask you one question that's come in the Q&A. A number of people have mentioned the fact that at the moment there is an issue with male researchers being restricted in terms of being able to leave Ukraine, and there is a question about whether or not this scheme is only going to be relevant to women at this point in time. And I wondered if you wanted to comment on this situation from the Ukrainian perspective, and if there's anything you can kind of help us to understand the situation a little bit better.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's very important questions for all Ukrainian researchers. As you know, the rules for crossing the border by the citizens of Ukraine who are going abroad are not the competence of our ministry. We are not the responsible ministry to make this rule, but it means that we're not competent executive body of the central government in Ukraine, and we cannot change these rules. Such issues are within the competence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and the State Border Service of Ukraine. But we continue to articulate this problem to the government of Ukraine, to the parliament, to the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, to the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Education, Science and Innovation. We have these issues in top questions, how we can support Ukrainian researchers. Currently, the ministry can provide support to scientists and researchers informing the State Border Service of Ukraine by sending a letter with a request to enable travel abroad. Now we know a single cases when scientists and researchers will not allow to travel abroad. And the reason for this was just lack of the papers, I mean about invitations when they crossing the border, which confirm the purpose of the trip abroad. So if somebody from Ukrainian researchers or scientists are going to travel abroad to participate in some research project, they just have to send to our ministry letter, and we'll prepare a special letter of support to our State Border Service.
Great, thank you so much for that clarification. That's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have many questions coming in, but the vast majority of them naturally are about the actual practicalities of the scheme. So I'm actually going to leave those until we get onto our speakers who will actually speak about those topics. So what I'd like to do now then is close this first part of our programme. Thank all our speakers who have spoken so far. I think we can consider the scheme well and truly launched, and we can now move on to talking about the practical elements. So the next two speakers that I would like to introduce this morning are Andrea Hutera and Maria Fedotovica, who are going to give us an overall introduction to the scheme and talk about how it fits into the overall Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions programme run by the European Commission. So Andrea is Research Programme Manager at the European Research Executive Agency. And she's responsible within the agency for the MSCA4Ukraine project. And then her colleague Maria is Policy Officer at the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Unit in the European Commission, and she's responsible for the cooperation with the Eastern Partnership countries and regulatory governance. So Andrea, Maria, I hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today, I will briefly introduce MSCA4Ukraine scheme, and then I will pass the floor to my colleagues who will deal with more practical details. So MSCA4Ukraine scheme was created as as part of the EU response to Russia's war against Ukraine. The main goal of MSCA4Ukraine is to support the research and innovation community from Ukraine by offering doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships to displaced researchers and putting into practice the EU's core principles of academic freedom and freedom of scientific research. As already mentioned by the Deputy Director General Viviane Hoffmann, MSCA4Ukraine will not only enable researchers to continue their valuable scientific work, but it also will provide a possibility for the supported fellows to reintegrate back in Ukraine through measures such as the secondments at Ukrainian institutions. This way, the cooperation between Ukrainian and EU institutions will also be strengthened at the same time. Although MSCA for Ukraine is not technically part of the main four skłodowska-curie actions, and the main difference lies in that it targets specific group of researchers, it still is aligned to the main objectives and principles of the main skłodowska-curie actions. For instance, the scheme retains the bottom-up approach, meaning that the projects are open to all domains of research and innovation, and they will be freely chosen by applicants themselves. In addition, the scheme offers the same attractive conditions as doctoral networks and postdoctoral fellowships, meaning that the remuneration for the researchers awarded the fellowships will be exactly the same as in those two actions. And finally, I would also like to mention that MSCA for Ukraine promotes effective supervision, which contributes to creating a supportive environment for the researchers to conduct their work and succeed in their future careers. So with this brief introduction, I would like to give the floor to my colleague from Research Executive Agency, Andrea. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So, as mentioned before, the MSCA for Ukraine fellowships are part of the fast response of the European Union, the European Commission, to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And the response has been fast, and I think that's also nicely illustrated by how fast this grant or this project has been implemented or started to be implemented. So it was first published in the amended Horizon Europe work program on the 10th of May, and the deadline for proposal submission was on the 21st of June. And by really hard work of the consortium, it was possible to sign the grant agreement on the 2nd of August, so less than 2 months between submission and the signature of the grant agreement. Officially, the project started on the 1st of July, and you've heard before, the first or the call has been published earlier or like last month in September. Today there's the launch, and soon you will hear about that later. The online application platform will open. The more technical details to this project are, it's been mentioned before, it's a grant size of 25 million euros, and the project will run for 4 years. Technically, this is implemented by the Research Executive Agency, and I'm very proud that I will be the project officer in charge of this project, and we work very closely with DG EAC regarding the policy aspects. Practically, the way this works is the consortium runs this project. They are in charge of dissemination, evaluation, selection of the fellows, the administration of the project, etc. You will hear more about that from the next speakers, and they regularly report to the Commission, to REA in that case. So we provide the funding, the EC provides the funding to the consortium, and it's up to the consortium to then select and then provide the funding to the institutions which host doctoral or postdoctoral researchers. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you both. I just have one question from the audience, which has been liked by quite a few people, which I will ask because I think it relates to other MSCA actions, which is whether or not somebody is eligible to apply for this scheme if they've also applied for an MSCA individual fellowship. So I wonder if that's something one of you might comment on before we move on to our next speakers.
I'm happy. Oh.
Up to you. I'm happy also to comment. Andrea, do you prefer to go ahead?
It's not a problem in principle. There is no restriction.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Nice, easy, clear answer. Thank you both so much for your interventions. So again, most of the questions we're getting refer to very specific technical aspects, so we will come to those after our next speakers. So I'd just like to encourage you. I mean, I don't think you need any encouragement. There are many, many questions already, but if anybody does have additional questions or you think of more as we go through the next presentations, please do put them in the Q&A function, and please do vote with the thumbs up symbol for the ones that you actually would most like to hear the answers to. We're clearly not going to be able to get through them all today, although we will get through as many as we possibly can. So do indicate which ones you'd actually like to hear from us on. So we're now going to turn to our next speakers, who will take us through the very practical aspects of the scheme. So the first speaker I'm going to invite to speak next is Sinead O'Gorman. And Sinead is European Director of Scholars at Risk. She's based in Ireland, and she leads the promotion of Scholars at Risk's mission in Europe and the establishment of national SAR sections across Europe. She's worked at Scholars at Risk since 2007, including as Deputy Executive Director at Scholars at Risk in New York. And she's got many years of experience of higher education and human rights issues. And Sinead is going to talk about the activities that are planned under the MSCA4Ukraine scheme, key information about how the fellowships will work, the eligibility criteria, the matchmaking services and application requirements. And then after we've heard from Sinead and had a Q&A based on the input that you hear from her, we'll hear from Frank Albrecht, who is Programme Director of the Philip Schwarz Initiative at the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation Support Programme for At-Risk Researchers. And Frank was previously Programme Officer for North America, Australia, New Zealand and Oceania, and Senior Coordinator for Strategic Planning at the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. And Frank will talk to you about how and when to submit your application, evaluation criteria, selection processes, and the timeline. So without further ado, Sinead, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and a warm welcome to everyone today. A particularly warm welcome to all of the Ukrainian researchers who are joining us, and we really hope that this scheme will be useful to so many of you. My thanks again to the partners and to the European Commission for funding the much needed scheme. I'm going to now share my screen as we roll up our sleeves and get stuck into some of the details, including. All right, okay, I think we can see this now. So I'm going to give a basic overview of the scheme's activities. I'm going to provide you with some of the key information about fellowships, outline the eligibility criteria, and also explain how we can help researchers and host organizations to connect with each other if they're not yet working together to prepare an application. And then I'm going to hand to Frank Albrecht from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, as Amanda mentioned, and Frank will actually go through the application requirements, the evaluation and selection processes, and some important dates. So MSCA4Ukraine is, of course, first and foremost a fellowship scheme. And as the implementing partners, our primary objective is the swift deployment of this fellowship scheme for researchers from Ukraine. And right now, this is where all of our time and energy is invested in getting this scheme up and running so that fellowships can be dispersed as soon as possible. However, in addition to administering fellowships, our organizations will be providing several additional areas of support. We are already, as many of you know, running a help desk to respond to your queries, and we're thankful to those of you who have already submitted queries to the help desk. We're making our way through those. My apologies for some delays relating to some of the questions, which I hope we can get through today. And please be assured that in the coming days, we will get to all of those questions that are in our inboxes. So as is the case for other MSCA4Ukraine programs, we're also going to pay strong attention within this scheme to career development and networking opportunities. And these opportunities will be a combination of activities that are led by the consortium as part of our work, and also activities that are led by host organizations. So as Frank will outline, applications from host organizations will be required to provide information on training and career development opportunities that they will provide to the researcher. And their plan will outline the researcher's training and career needs, including, as examples, training on transferable skills or any language skills training on offer, or planning for publications, participation in conferences or events. And the trainings that will be led by the consortium and the networking sessions and career development opportunities, we will design those together with researchers from Ukraine to ensure that the offerings really are meeting the current needs. And so our intention is to gather MSCA4Ukraine fellows at the annual Philip Schwartz Initiative and Inspire Europe Fora that are taking place in Berlin, and to organize career development sessions in connection with those. On the question of reintegration, the MSCA4Ukraine work topic states that the fellowship should allow supporting a reintegration phase in Ukraine for researchers wishing to return if safe conditions for return are met. So as a consortium, we'll be ensuring that we're in continuous consultation with members of the Ukrainian research and innovation communities and with the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine throughout the project's lifetime. And as you may have noticed in the call documents, we're inviting host organizations to include details in their application on measures such as double affiliations or joint doctoral supervision, or any other distance teaching and learning arrangements with institutions in Ukraine. And we hope that this will also incentivize EU institutions to prioritize facilitating and sustaining these connections. So for the rest of our time, we'll focus directly on fellowships within this presentation. So the terms of reference, as I hope many of you have seen, are now available on the MSCA4Ukraine web pages. And I really urge you to read through those terms of reference, as they will respond to many of the queries that people are posing, and we can get through the additional queries, I hope, today. They outline the eligibility criteria and the application requirements in detail. So the key information about fellowships: first of all, the applicant must be the host, prospective host organization in an EU member state or a Horizon Europe associated countries. And so those are the 27 EU member states or the associated countries that we have, we've provided a link to those in the terms of reference. There are 16 Horizon Europe associated countries that are eligible to be host organizations under MSCA4Ukraine. The duration of the fellowships go from 6 months as a minimum duration up to a maximum duration of 24 months. The applicable financial rates are the skłodowska-curie Actions doctoral and postdoctoral fellowship rates. And again, in the terms of reference, we provide a link to the MSCA4Ukraine, the MSCA work program, which includes the unit costs applicable for doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships. So I encourage you to refer to those. It is difficult at this stage to estimate how many fellowships the scheme will be able to offer, because the costs vary by country, of course, and the duration will vary by applicant. So at the very least, we will be offering over 120 fellowships, probably significantly more than that, depending on the duration requested. The disciplines, so the scheme is open to all domains of research and innovation. So I see that already we're having questions in that regard in the Q&A. So really it's open to all fields of research and innovation. Secondments are also allowed for up to 1/3 of the fellowship duration. And as outlined in the terms of reference, a secondment can be used to include a reintegration phase within Ukraine at any point within the fellowship scheme, if safe conditions allow. So eligibility criteria for researchers. First of all, they must be Ukrainian nationals whose primary residence was in Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022, or stateless persons or nationals from third countries other than Ukraine whose primary residence was in Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022. It is open to, so in addition to those first two criteria, the candidate must have been displaced on or after the 24th of February 2022 or ready to relocate from Ukraine. They must be PhD holders or doctoral candidates, so it's open to both. We have two different pathways. And the candidate must have the language skills required to successfully conduct their research activities at the host organization. With regard to this third criteria that you see outlined here, displaced on or after the 24th of February 2022, we have had, and we have today also, a significant number of queries in relation to any exceptions to that date of the 24th of February as the date of displacement. And we're really hoping to take a common sense and fair approach here. So in the coming days, we will provide some practical guidance on situations where a person was out of Ukraine temporarily, slightly before that date. So if you can bear with us for a short while so that we provide clear language as to the eligibility of those who are out of Ukraine on a temporary basis, we want to assure you that a common sense approach, we hope, will apply there, and a fair approach. I wanted to mention also, so we can come back in the Q&A to those eligibility criteria as people wish. With regard to connecting researchers with host organizations, it's clear to us that in many situations, host organizations do not yet have a researcher in mind with whom to submit an application. And so if you go to the MSCA4Ukraine web pages, there is an opportunity to complete an intake form. We encourage you to be willing to submit these details publicly. So as you can see on this screenshot from the website, host organizations are providing publicly contact information so that researchers may contact them directly if their fields of research match those listed on the form. We also have the option for host organizations who are not willing to list their email addresses publicly for one reason or another to still complete the form and ask us to ask for Scholars at Risk Europe's assistance with private matchmaking. So that is also a possibility. However, we are encouraging, just for the purposes of swift connections, if you are willing to make your details public so that researchers can contact you directly, that would be really wonderful. And then researchers seeking hosts, we also have on our website an intake form for researchers from Ukraine who do not yet have a host organization in mind with whom to submit an application. So in this case, we are not providing names and emails on our website. We're providing reference IDs, and then we have a very fast introductory process between those researchers who are submitting their details through that form and organizations that are interested in applying with a researcher from Ukraine. So please do visit the website and complete those forms if you are in need of assistance in that area. I'm going to hand to Frank to talk us through now the application requirements, but just for those of you who are who know that you already want assistance in some areas, please do first of all read the terms of reference, but if your response is not there, hopefully we'll get to it today. If we don't get to it, there's always this email address that you can write to, and please also visit the matchmaking information on the website. Thank you.
Frank, please go ahead, and then I think we'll have the questions after the two of you. I think that will make more sense. So the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you, Sinead, and thank you, of course, to the European Commission, to all our partners, and of course to the Ukrainian scholars and the prospective hosts taking part in today's session. I will now take us through the application requirements and the application process, so we'll be more on the specific technical side, and bear with me while I share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see this now. First, let's start out with the application.
No, we don't see it, or I don't see it anyway.
Okay. Let me just try this again. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's there now. Great, thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so we'll start out with the application requirements and the application process, and then I'll take you through the process steps and the timeline as well. The application, as Sinead mentioned before, will be a nomination of the candidate by the prospective host organization. We ask that each candidate is nominated by a separate application. This is also what the system will actually request. But we suggest that there is a degree of coordination at each applicant organization about the specific nominations, the applications that are actually submitted. Throughout the application process, there are 4 important roles. 4 persons who will play a role within the host institution or including the candidate. Let me just take you through those roles quickly to explain their responsibilities. First of all, there is the so-called primary contact point, which can be, for example, international office staff or a grants management officer or somebody with a similar function. They have a number of responsibilities. They will coordinate the application process for all candidates. They will serve as the primary contact for the MSCA4Ukraine Consortium throughout the application process and, in case it's successful, also throughout the funding period. They will ensure the compliance with the aforementioned MSCA4Ukraine terms of reference, including the eligibility criteria of candidates. They will ensure that an interview between academic mentor and the candidate will take place before the application is submitted to ensure the professional and personal match. They will verify certain documentation on the identity, the academic record, and relevant language proficiency of the candidate. Relevant language proficiency, just a word on that, it's not necessarily English, even though we request that all applications are made in English. But the relevant language here is the language required to successfully complete the research proposal at the host institution, at which it may be a different language than English. For doctoral candidates, in addition, the contact point will ensure that the candidate is actually enrolled in the doctoral program at the applicant organization. Contact point will develop a host organization statement to cover those aspects that were mentioned by Sinead before, for example, training, reintegration, integration, etc. They will initiate and complete the application in the online application portal, which I'll show you in a minute. And they will also ensure that everybody involved will make their contributions to this application in time so that the application can be submitted. The head of the applicant organization, which is somebody like a vice chancellor, a president, or an executive director, will not play an active role in the application process, but just in case there are questions or concerns that cannot be resolved directly with the contact person, it might be a possibility that they would be contacted by the MSCA4Ukraine Consortium. One very important person, of course, is the academic mentor, which can be any active researcher at the applicant organization. The academic mentor will conduct said interview before with the candidate before the application is submitted, again, to ensure professional and personal match. They will provide a confidential assessment of the candidate's academic profile, their academic achievements so far, and their potential for future academic achievements as well. And they will assess the quality of the research proposal. They will confirm that workspace and access to relevant research equipment and literature will be provided. Throughout the funding period, the fellowship, they will serve as the primary academic collaborator or advisor to the candidate. And in the case of doctoral candidates, they will actually be the PhD or doctoral supervisor. And they will actively support the candidate in successfully completing their research proposal and furthering their academic qualification and integration. And this will also be, the plan for this will also be laid out in the confidential statement. And of course, the most important person will be the candidate. They will provide all relevant information and documentation to the contact point for review, verification, and for submission through the online portal. Part of those documents will be a CV and a list of publications in separate documents, which will also be submitted through the online portal by the contact point. And finally, they will, of course, develop a research proposal and agree this with the prospective academic host. It was mentioned before, I'll just mention it again because it's such a vital date. The application portal, the online application portal, will open on the 24th of October 2022. A link will be provided through the MSCA4Ukraine website. And for your reference, during the preparation of the application, a read-only version of this online application portal will be put up on the MSCA4Ukraine website in the next few days. But I will take a few minutes to take you through the online application portal, just so that everybody has an understanding what you may expect when filling out this application. Once again, it will be initiated and coordinated and completed by the contact point at the applicant institution. And it will start out with some basic information, of course, the candidate's name. It will request a decision which program line will be applied for. This depends on the candidate's career stage. So there's, of course, a program line for doctorate holders or PhD holders, and there's a separate program line for doctoral candidates. In the vast majority of cases, MSCA4Ukraine fellowships, as is the practice for MSCA fellowships, will take the form of an employment contract, and only in those cases where national legislation prohibits an employment contract, it may take the form of a research fellowship. Of course, some contact information will be requested for those various roles that I described earlier. First of all, the contact point at the applicant institution, who will take the role of the project manager here, the head of the applicant institution also, and of course, of the academic mentor. Let's just take a minute for this one, because just a special feature here, you see that in addition to the contact details, there is a button that the contact point can activate, and this will create a link which will be forwarded to the academic mentor, and they can upload their confidential statement via this link, and also confirm via a checkbox that the workspace and research equipment access will be provided. This is to ensure the confidentiality of this statement. Of course, the personal details of the candidate will also be needed, and they will be requested here. You will note that at this point, no information on the dependents of that candidate are requested. This will come up at a later point, which I will show you in a minute. Some further information on the candidate will be required to understand the current place of residence, and if there isn't current institutional affiliation, also this affiliation, the date of departure, and there will be a request to upload a proof of identity, simply a copy of a passport, an identity card, or if those are not in the possession of the candidate, alternative documents. This will also be working, this will also work via a link created by activating this button. There is an online template, an online form in which all the educational qualification stages and the professional positions of the candidate are to be entered. We ask for submission via this online form instead of a PDF, because CVs are very diverse in terms of layout and content, and we'd like to have a simplified, clear, and comparable format for our external evaluators. Some information will be required, of course, on the specific field of research a primary field, and for example, in the case of interdisciplinary research, a secondary field as well. Details on the doctoral degree, if one has been obtained, and of course, information on the start date and the duration of the fellowship itself. Information on the research project will be requested, a title, a brief summary, and some keywords, which will make it easier to identify the ideal external evaluators. And finally, there will be the opportunity to upload several required documents. The list of publications will be uploaded as a PDF document. The outline of the research proposal, so of the research project, will be uploaded as well at this point. The ethical self-assessment will be a requirement. We will provide a template, a Word template, where specific questions on ethics related points can be entered, and this can be uploaded here as well. And the host institution statement on measures to support the candidate will also be uploaded here. There will be a template guiding the contact point to create this statement, to address all the questions that are relevant in the statement. And I failed to mention earlier that a template will also exist for the academic mentor to guide them through the preparation of their confidential statement on the candidate and their research proposal. So there will also be a number of guiding questions to assist them to address all relevant points. We will also request a doctoral certificate, or in the case of doctoral candidates, an enrollment confirmation by the applicant institution. Finally, there will be a financing plan that is required, and this is the point where there will be some very basic information on dependents of the candidate, which are of course relevant for the family allowance later on. This is only throughout the application stage. This is the only information that will be requested, but of course, proof of the status of dependents will be asked before the grant agreements are signed. Once the application has been submitted through the online form, those are the steps that each application will go through. First, of course, there will be an eligibility check by the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation on behalf of the MSCA4Ukraine Consortium, ensuring that all the applications are complete and meet the eligibility criteria. There will be an ethics check, meaning that if the ethical self-assessment indicates that there are ethics relevant questions, then the applicant organization and the candidate will be requested to provide a statement on which formal ethics approvals, for example, of internal ethics boards or national ethics boards, will be required. Those approvals are not required at the application stage, just a clarification which approvals will be needed before funding can start. They will be needed before funding actually commences. The applications will then move on to the evaluation stage. Throughout the evaluation stage, 3 external evaluators will review and score each application. A bit more on that later. And finally, based on the results of the external evaluation, the selection stage will take place, where the MSCA4Ukraine Selection Committee will award the fellowships based on the results of the external evaluation. Fellowship offers will be made by the Humboldt Foundation very quickly after the selection committee meeting, and the notification to unsuccessful applicants will also be made very quickly after the selection committee meeting. Let's take a few minutes for the evaluation criteria. There are 3 core criteria, which I think are familiar from the MSCA in general. First of all, excellence. Second of all, impact. And third of all, implementation. Excellence and impact take up 35%, and implementation take up 30% of the evaluation. The sub-criteria for excellence, we're starting out with the postdoctoral fellowships. I will move on later to the doctoral fellowships. In the postdoctoral fellowships, the sub-criteria for excellence are the quality of the researcher's professional experience. their competences and skills so far, and also their potential for future contributions, for future research accomplishment. A second sub-criterion will apply to the research proposal in terms of its originality and its potential to create a significant contribution to the respective field of research. The second criterion, as mentioned before, is impact. There will be 3 sub-criteria here. First of all, the host organization's plan on how to support the researcher will be assessed. This will include an assessment of the training and career development measures, the measures to enhance temporary integration in the host country's academic community, and access for fellows and family members to accommodation and other important services. The second sub-criterion, this is of particular importance, will be on how the host institution plans to assist the researcher to prepare for reintegration, which includes efforts to maintain and strengthen connections with organizations and researchers in Ukraine during the fellowship. This is a particularly important sub-criterion. I will explain a bit later why this is the case. The third sub-criterion addresses the fit of the proposed fellowship setup with the specific needs and the interests of the researcher and the advancement of their proposed research. In particular, in the case of short-term fellowships, let's say a 6 or 9 month fellowship, it would be very, very interesting to the consortium and the evaluators to know how this specific short fellowship would fit into a longer-term plan for the researcher. Finally, the criterion of implementation. There are 2 sub-criteria, one addressing the professional match between the researcher and the academic host and the host organization, and also the compatibility of the candidate with the host organization. For example, specifically how this will work into a particular strength of the department within the institution, or how a void can actually be filled by the candidate. For the doctoral fellowships, the criteria are actually different only in the part on excellence. Of course, it cannot focus very strongly on the profile of the doctoral candidate so far. It has a stronger focus on the potential for future research accomplishment. The second sub-criterion will review the proposal as a first independent contribution to the relevant academic field. The other criteria and sub-criteria are actually the same as for the doctoral fellowships. The process of evaluation, scoring, and selection, as mentioned before, there are 3 external evaluators for each application. This will be a documents-based evaluation. No interviews are being planned. This is due to the urgent need for these fellowships. That is very clear, I think, to everybody. So we try to keep the evaluation and selection process as brief as possible. And this is why we ask the academic mentor and host institution to actually interview the candidate personally or online before the application is submitted. The scoring will work with a scale from 0 to 5, 0 being unsatisfactory and 5 being excellent, for each of the 3 evaluation criteria. Again, excellence, impact, and implementation. All the applications that score above 70% in total, so 15% being the total, 70% of 15 being 10.5 points, they will proceed to the selection stage. And the selection committee will actually be following the scoring of the external evaluators. However, we expect a high number of nominations, so it is to be expected that there will be a group of applications that will reach an identical score. But potentially, because funds are limited, not all of them will be able to be awarded. So this is where the selection committee decides. and it will just decide on various factors, but one focus will be on the impact criterion, especially the sub-criterion of reintegration. This is why this is of particular importance. Unsuccessful applications that actually scored above 70%, but were still not granted a fellowship, will be placed on a ranked reserve list. And the Humboldt Foundation and the consortium will be bound by this reserve list to reassign grants that are declined by successful applicants. And of course, there will be a redress procedure in place for unsuccessful applications who prefer a review. Finally, let me just give you a brief overview of the timeline. As I said, we try to keep the evaluation and selection process as quick and swift as possible. There will be 3 internal cutoff dates for applications, meaning that we accept applications from 24th of October on a rolling basis, but there will be internal cutoff dates. On the 11th of November, all the applications submitted by that date will start going through the evaluation and selection process. And the funding decisions for this group can be expected by the end of January. On the 9th of December, there will be a second cutoff date. Those funding decisions can be expected by the end of February. And if there are still grants to be awarded, there will be a third cutoff date on the 9th of January, for which the decisions can be expected by the end of March. But please note, those are not fixed dates. They can be adjusted because it is a bit difficult to foresee the volume and the quality of applications. So it is possible that we will have to adjust those cutoff dates. Please note that grants will be made to suitable applications until funds are exhausted. So we do propose that we do advise that to apply early and not to leave applications until, let's say, December or January. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Frank, and thank you also to Sinead. I will try my best in the remaining time that we've got to get through as many of your questions as possible. And I'd like to start with Sinead. You mentioned earlier the issue of eligibility in terms of where people had been in February 2020, but we're still getting a huge number of questions about that. So I wonder if maybe just to start, you could just repeat what you said previously, just to clarify the situation regarding people that were out of Ukraine in February 2022.
Okay, so I think here the spirit of the scheme is to provide the opportunity for people who who are displaced from Ukraine or who are ready to relocate from Ukraine to apply for this scheme. And so a common sense approach will apply. So we're hoping to provide very clear language within the next few days on this question of candidates who were out of Ukraine temporarily, whether it was for a business trip abroad, short-term research fellowship, some temporary reason for which you were out of Ukraine, but you maintained your permanent residency within Ukraine and you were a permanent resident on the 24th of February. We do want those people to be eligible, so we just need to decide on very clear guidance on that point. And if you can bear with us another few days, we hope to provide that very publicly. Yep.
Great, thank you. So the information will be coming in the coming days. Great, thank you. And then it's interesting in looking at our questions and our chat, we've got a really good balance today here from host institutions and also researchers, which I think is great. And we have a few questions about the kind of matchmaking between hosts and researchers. So I wondered, could you remind people where they can go to find hosts or to find openings? And also there's a question about whether or not a host university has to be registered in the list of prospective organizations in advance of the 24th of October, or whether or not people can go direct to the platform once it's open.
Thanks, Amanda. So on that last piece, absolutely not. There's no requirement to submit your details in advance through this Scholars at Risk matchmaking system at all. So this is a separate system for researchers and host organizations to help them find each other. That is not an application process. So there will be a separate online application portal that will open on October 24th. And many host organizations we know already have researchers in mind and are already preparing their applications, and they just go directly to the portal. There's no need to come to the Scholars at Risk matchmaking service. So if you, for the list of organizations, the public list is now available at sareurope.eu. I'll put it in the chat. /MSCA4Ukraine. That landing page will direct you very clearly to the list of host organizations. Our apologies, the website is extremely slow right now due to the traffic, most likely. We are in contact about a better system to deal with this level of traffic, so thank you for bearing with us. So yes, the list of organizations is just very clearly labeled if you go to that sareurope.eu /MSCA4Ukraine.
Perfect, thank you, very clear. And so now a very practical question. A number of people have asked about budget and whether or not the fellowship amount is the same as for an MSCA individual fellowship, and if not, what it is. So I don't know which of the two of you would like to take that.
I can go ahead. I think maybe it was in that first piece. So if we've also provided a link within the terms of reference to the MSCA work program, and within that you have the a table that breaks down the unit contributions for postdoctoral and doctoral fellowship programs. So the living allowance, mobility allowance, family allowance, all of those are clearly provided in the work program. The only difference with MSCA4Ukraine is in the costs to the institution. In both cases, the institutional costs that will apply are those at the postdoctoral fellowship rate. If Andrea is still with us, Andrea might be best placed to answer any very specific follow-up questions in this area. But that I think those are the main points, that the tables are in the work program, and then for the institutional costs, it will be the postdoc fellowship rate. Andrea, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've explained that well. Thank you.
But actually, I have another question about the relationship with MSCA generally as well, which is a lot of people have asked about whether or not there's a limitation on the number of years since receiving a PhD in terms of eligibility, and whether or not this is the same as normal Marie Curie rules, or whether or not it's completely open.
Right. No, there is no upper limit in terms of years after PhD, or no age-related limitations either.
Great, thank you. So let me look for our next question. Again, a short kind of question about host eligibility. A number of people are asking, can UK organisations participate?
So right now the scheme is open to host organizations in countries that are already associated to, that are already Horizon Europe associated countries. So unfortunately, right now, UK organizations are not eligible to apply. However, UK organizations can host secondments as part of the scheme. So you might have the primary host organization that is based elsewhere in Europe, but that works with a UK organization on the secondment piece, whether it's at an academic or non-academic organization then within the UK for the secondment.
Great, thank you. And then another question we have is whether or not the researcher has to work full-time during the fellowship, or whether or not there's opportunities for part-time fellowships.
So we would apply the same rules as the in the other MSCA fellowships. So a part-time fellowship can be agreed with the host institution.
Okay, so there is flexibility and there is the possibility to address that in the application.
Yes.
Yeah. And then another very practical question we've had several times is, at the host institution, who should sign the host support statement?
So it should be by the contact point, but well, they should be entitled to make this commitment on behalf of the host institution.
Okay. So anybody,
excuse me, sorry, it can also be signed by the head of the institution, of course, but it's of course important that the entitlement is given.
So essentially, whoever at the host institution is authorized to make these kind of offers and these kind of decisions. But you're not looking for a set position or particular role for everybody.
Yes, exactly.
Great, thank you. And then a number of questions about the requests for the host institution to check documents. And Frank, you mentioned this would essentially be in the form of providing a passport, if a copy of a passport, if I understood correctly. But people are asking, is there anything else that the host actually has to do in terms of requirements for verifying identity?
For verifying identity, so reviewing identity documents should be sufficient. But of course, there is a number of other points to be verified via documentation, such as academic qualifications, etc. So the review and verification of those would be in the responsibility of the applicant institution.
Great, thank you very much. And then, sorry, I'm just looking for my next question here. A question here about, so it's obviously in the documentation, it talks about the importance of measures to prepare for continued affiliation with and future integration into Ukraine if safe conditions for such a return are met. And we have a question asking if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on what's meant by that and how that fits into the application procedure.
I'm happy to say a few words there. So first of all, it's maybe very important to be clear that secondments and reintegration are not required components of each application. So the researcher is not required to return to Ukraine under this program. It's rather that we want to provide an opportunity to support researchers who do assess that it is safe to return and to take up positions at the home institution or at another organization within Ukraine as part of the secondment facility within the grant. So as part of the application, we're encouraging organizations to outline any measures that they wish to take as part of the duration of the fellowship to prepare for that reintegration if it is deemed safe by the candidate to return at some point. It's also possible to submit the application without including those measures, but also later, as within the duration of the fellowship, you can also then decide to apply for the secondment. You don't need to apply for it from the outset. There will still be an opportunity to apply for it once you're at the host organization. Does that address the main question, Amanda, or was
no, I think so. I think that's very clear. Yes, thank you. I think if the person who asked it, if that doesn't address the question, feel free to ask again, and we'll see if we can get to it. And then another question I have is about exactly how to classify dependents accompanying the researcher. Who would count as a dependent accompanying the researcher?
We will also follow the established rules here by the MSCA. So those are persons linked to the researcher by marriage or an established relationship of an equivalent status to marriage, and so that is the spouse, and of course children who are actually supported by the candidate.
Okay.
So it's a bit more inclusive than simply saying marriage only and direct their own children only.
Great, thank you very much. Then my next question, there's a requirement to submit copies of diplomas and confirmation of PhD or equivalent. And somebody is asking, is the PhD diploma itself enough to confirm possession of a PhD degree? And if not, is there anything else that needs to be provided?
So for the consortium, we only request a copy of the PhD diploma, but it may be up to the applicant's institution to maybe also request an academic transcript or any further documentation, but that is really on the side of the applicant institution. We only request a copy of the diploma itself.
Great, thank you. And also many comments, Frank, asking about templates and application forms. You've already mentioned this, but maybe you'd like to repeat it again, just to be clear for everybody that when these will be available effectively.
Thank you, absolutely. So first of all, a read-only template for the online application form will be put up on the MSCA4Ukraine website in the next few days. We're just ironing out a few last points there, and then it will be put up there. In addition, there will be templates or lists of questions for the following. First of all, for the academic mentor statement, assessing the qualification of the scholar, etc., of the candidate, and the quality of the research proposal. So there will be a template for this, and there will be a separate template for a separate statement, the statement of the host institution, addressing the more institutional support and integration and training measures that the host institution intends to implement for the candidate. So those templates will also be ready in the next few days, together with the online application form.
Thanks very much. Then the next question I have, can a commercial entity be a host organization?
Yes, so, sorry, Sinead, if you like comment. Yes, so non-academic organizations are also entitled to apply for this scheme.
Thank you. Sinead, did you want to add anything?
Well, I will just add, and if Andre wants to come in also, that within the terms of reference, we've just provided a link to the definition of a non-academic organization for the purposes of this, of the MSCA4Ukraine scheme, and it's the same definition that MSCA is using. So please refer to that if you're uncertain.
Perfect, thank you. And then I think what will probably have to be our last question, unfortunately, because we're nearly out of time. Frank, you talked about the various cutoff dates and so on, and a number of people are asking whether or not, and you said this yourself, but maybe just to repeat it, whether or not it's advisable to actually apply as soon as possible, and how you kind of balance that sort of, taking the time to get a good application ready with applying as soon as possible while there's still funding available. So I wondered if you had any comments on that.
Yes. We do advise to apply early because we will be accepting applications on a rolling basis, and we will also be providing grants on a semi-rolling basis in the up to three selection committee meetings that I just pointed out earlier. But it is possible that if we receive a high number of applications with a high degree of quality, that they will actually be at an advantage because they will be evaluated first, reviewed first, and go through the selection committee meeting first. So it is absolutely advisable to use the time starting now to find a match, find a host institution, find a candidate now, prepare the documents that you can prepare, the various statements, of course, the research proposal, etc., conduct the interview, and then be ready to submit as soon as possible after the portal opens on 24th of October.
Great, thank you. That's very clear. And Sinead, is there any last comment you'd like to make before we finish?
I think really just to echo what Frank is saying and to add perhaps that the templates will be added to in that same area of the MSCA for Ukraine web pages. So it will be very clear what templates you need to use where. But in the meantime, all the information you need, there won't be any surprises in those templates. That information is already in the terms of reference. So please just do go through and start gathering that and get in touch with us again if there are any issues. I recognize that we haven't managed to get to all of the questions. So the help desk, that's the purpose of the help desk also. So thank you for your patience as we work through those.
Thank you. And yes, I do hope we've answered as many of your questions as possible. But as Sinead says, do please send them in if we haven't. With that, I think we're going to have to wrap up because we're out of time. Frank, Sinead, thank you so much for your presentations and for answering all the questions. I'd like to thank again all the speakers this morning for your interventions and your time. I'd like to thank the European Commission for funding this and making it all possible. And most of all, I'd like to thank all of you watching for your participation and your interest, particularly all the Ukrainian researchers that have joined us and will be looking to apply for this scheme. I will remind you that I'm sure you don't need reminding, we've said it many times, but to just reiterate that the opening date of applications on the platform will be the 24th of October. And then also finally to remind you, the recording of this webinar will be available on the EUA YouTube channel, and we will of course share with you all the information from today, including the slides, so you'll get all of the information. And so once again, thank you, and a final word, good luck to all of the applicants. So thank you, goodbye.